Hi, everybody. Thanks again for being here. My name is Brendan Vaughan. I'm editor-in-chief of Fast Company. I'm excited to be here at this moment, about to start a conversation with Matthew Prince, who is the co-founder and CEO of Cloudflare. Cloudflare is a company that is an incredibly important part of the internet, but it may be, I don't want to say probably, it may be one of the least known companies relative to its importance in this space. So Cloudflare basically keeps the internet secure and it keeps the internet fast. These guys, Matthew and his partners, founded the company around 15 years ago. The company has since gone public quite successfully. Market cap right now is about $44 billion. Down a little bit this year, but plenty of company on that front.
Up actually quite a bit this year, but that's
down
in the last couple of weeks.
In the last month, I should say, yes. So the last few weeks have been bumpy along for just about everybody. So anyway, we're going to get into a lot of issues that relate to protecting the future of the internet, both from a security standpoint and from a business model standpoint. So let me start getting right into this by asking Matthew, because Cloudflare does often need a little bit of table setting and definition, what does this company do and why do we need it online?
So Brendan, thank you so much for having me. So Cloudflare, our mission is to help build a better internet. And we were talking backstage, at some level what we're doing is we're taking all of the sort of technology that the biggest companies used to only have access to. If you were Facebook or Google or one of the really large companies, and we're democratizing that. We're making it available for anyone that's out there. What that means is we run a giant network. So we're in well over 300 cities around the world. Our customers are content creators, publishers, anyone who's trying to put an application, anything online, they put that behind our network, and then we try to make them faster, more reliable, more secure, anything that we can do to give them all the advantages that, again, only the internet giants used to have. And today, well over 20% of the internet sits behind Cloudflare's network. We make sure that, again, everyone can be accessible anywhere in the world, and it's been an amazing journey.
Tell us a little bit more before we get into some of the nitty gritty about just a few more details on that. Sort of how many customers do you have? Characterize the sort of range. I know there's an enormous range from the Fortune 500 to the smallest, individual operator. But to get a sense of kind of who those people are and what precisely it is that they're buying when they sign up for you.
Yeah, so we provide a number of different services, but I think for this audience, people who are content creators, if you are putting something online, you want to make sure it's safe. We have a free version of our service that you can sign up for. We do that because we really believe that everybody should have access to these tools. But if you're a large company, so if you're Canva, who's here, who's been a long time customer of ours, it's over a third of the Fortune 500 rely on us to be accessible, and so we have customers all the way from free individuals all the way up to customers that pay us tens of millions of dollars a year.
And when you started, I've read a little bit about initially the idea going back 15 years now when security, if I'm not misrepresenting that, security was a little bit more of the focus then, right? So you wanted to not slow things down. And you wound up sort of, I don't know if accidentally is the word, but maybe surprisingly, not only didn't slow things down, but found ways to actually speed things up. And I've heard you also say, if you're primarily interested in performance, you get security. You kind of also get security. If you're primarily interested in security, you sort of also get performance. So talk a little bit about the dynamic between those two things.
Yeah, the idea from the beginning, and you can often tell where companies start by looking at their name. So Cloudflare was a play on a firewall in the cloud. So Flare is synonym for fire. We were playing with like Fire Cloud and those things, and it was the domain that was available. And so that's how a lot of these things start. That's where we started. And the big objection everyone had in the beginning was, listen, it makes a ton of sense to take what you would usually use a firewall or some sort of security appliance and move that into the cloud, but you're going to add a bump in the road. You're going to slow things down in the process. And so we became just obsessed with how could we get to kind of average performance. And it was actually, before we launched, one of our very first customers was actually South by Southwest. And the challenge that they had was, relatively, scrappy organization, didn't have a ton of resources, had, when the panel picker launches or when they start releasing tickets, they get just this huge flood of traffic. They have a whole bunch of people who are trying to game that system. And so back in 2010, right before South by Southwest, they actually signed up for us. And it was in this I always will feel a debt of gratitude to the festival because of the fact that they trusted us with their traffic. They trusted us with doing that. And again, that was one of the sort of early larger organizations that we helped get to make sure they were fast and available and reliable and secure online.
Great. You actually answered a question I was about to ask next, but I'm going to ask it anyway to maybe get a more recent example. But I was going to ask you to kind of cite, like, what's a good example of a moment that you're particularly proud of when Cloudflare really saved either a lot of money or an embarrassing potential news story that was kind of headed off by a product that you offer. What's a moment that really kind of captures like Cloudflare at its best that has happened in the last, say, couple years?
Yeah, I think that whenever I get a question like this, the moment that sort of crystallizes the most in my head was back in 2014. We had a small team, and the big difference between the free version of our product and the paid version of our product at the time was that the free version didn't include encryption, and the paid version did. And we were having this debate. There was a French engineer on a team. His name is Mathieu, and he was saying, pretty forcefully, the future, a better internet in the future is going to be an encrypted internet. And so we shouldn't be charging for what should just be table stakes for everything that's out there. And I remember explaining to him, like, gosh, but we have to have these certificate authorities, and they charge us based on the number of certs we have, and we can't give it away for free, and technically it's this really hard challenge. And he said, I don't care. Our mission is to help build a better internet. We need to find a way of solving this problem. And we did. We figured out the business part. We figured out how technically we could do it. We actually redesigned a bunch of encryption standards to make sure that they could perform. And I remember on September 27th of 2014, we pushed a button, and that day we doubled the amount of the internet that was encrypted. And that felt just like, whoa, you can make a real difference. And Let's Encrypt and a bunch of things that have come subsequently have all said that they were inspired by the actions that we did. And I think that that's the sort of thing that we're always trying to do. So right now, the new version of that is everyone's concerned about like post-quantum encryption and how that's going to happen. And there are a whole bunch of companies out there that are saying we're going to charge for this and make a whole bunch of money off of it. We just believe that, again, it's table stakes. And so we should be investing in coming up with those standards. So we've partnered with organizations like Google in order to figure out what actually works, rolled it out, tested it, worked with like the IETF to set the standards, and now anyone, even a free customer, your traffic is all encrypted with an encryption standard that is post-quantum resistant, and we do that for free because we really, it sounds cheesy, but if you talk to anyone at Cloudflare and you say, why do you work at Cloudflare? The first thing they'll say is, I believe in the mission, and I believe that we should help make a better internet, and that's fundamentally what motivates everyone who comes. It's why they'll show up to work, because I can't think of anything more important to be working on.
Yeah, so I want to pivot into a different type of protecting the internet, to borrow again from the title of this session, protecting the business model of the internet, particularly protecting the business model of an industry that is near and dear to my heart, information, media, but other kinds of information too, the production of the kind of content that has always been the lifeblood of the internet that is going to get easier to make using computers. Let's put it that way. Already is easier to make using computers. Before I ask you about your ideas for protecting the information ecosystem of the internet, I want to point out to everybody that Matthew is also a media entrepreneur as well, who owns the Park Record, the local newspaper in Matthew's hometown, right, of Park City, Utah. So can you tell us a little bit about why you wanted to buy this paper before we get into sort of some of the bigger ideas about the media?
Local news matters. And I first place I ever saw my name in print was in this local newspaper. I was born and raised in Park City, and it was dying. It had been bought by a larger sort of conglomerate who, again, was trying to do the best they could, but they had to deliver a bottom line. They had to sort of centralize a lot of things, and so they cut back the newsroom. They had shrunk it, and again, we're a small town. and something like a local newspaper is critically important for small towns. And so we're fortunate enough to be able to, we approached them and said, we think you're doing a great job, but we think local owners can always, are always better than someone else. And to their credit, they were willing to divest it. They've been great partners in helping us kind of get through that transition. It's been incredibly rewarding. And so we've run it, we're in the process of converting it from a for-profit to a non-profit, which, because again, we're not trying to make money off of it. We want to really be serving the community. But it was interesting, when we bought it, I mean, it's not public, but we bought it for about $2 million. Cash flowed between $600,000 and $800,000, which, like, if you can buy a business that cash flows $600,000 to $800,000, like that for $2 million, that's actually a pretty good deal. But we then immediately took that $600,000 and $800,000 and we plowed it back into reporting and media. We doubled the size of the newsroom, and I sort of called in and said, hey, how's the business doing? And they said, well, now it's still cash flowing $600,000 to $800,000. And I was like, but didn't we just invest that? And they said, yeah, but now more people are willing to, more advertisers are willing to advertise, more people are subscribing. And so we just keep doing that, and it keeps being successful. We have no interest in owning like other newspapers. We're doing this because we believe in the community. But I do think it's a pretty interesting model where if you can provide really high quality information, if you can serve a community, media businesses can actually be good businesses. And I think that there is a role for sort of patrons of those businesses to support them and help support the community which is out there.
Did you not see a path to profitability or sustainability to run it as a for-profit?
We did, but at some level, like, I don't need to make any more money. Like, that's not what motivates me anymore, to be totally honest. Never was, really. And but if I can be, again, a good steward to the community where I live and where my family lives, like that's way more rewarding than anything else. And I think part of this is, how do you make sure that it endures and it lasts, and setting it up in a foundation that it can support itself is really a good thing. And again, we just want to keep plowing it in, because local news matters, and we have less and less of it every day. And I think that's that is making us worse as a society. And so this is a little corner of the world that matters a lot to us, and we want to invest in. And I hope that that people find interesting ways to support local news, because it's critically important.
So let's talk now about this kind of broader vision that you have for the problems facing the media ecosystem, which is based, historically has been based in the digital era on kind of a mutually beneficial relationship between news makers and other kind of content creators and the search engines, Google and the other players in traditional search. That is breaking in the era of AI search. So I'll have plenty of follow-ups, but I thought the best way to do this is for you to kind of share with the group here what your vision is, the solution that you imagine for how we might create a economically sustainable model here.
Yeah, so let me tell you sort of the journey. We were, at some level, we're a cybersecurity company. And we do performance, we do reliability, but 50% of our revenue comes from delivering cybersecurity. And so the villain, the enemy for us is often the hacker, which is out there, or in many cases nation states, China or Russia or Iran. They're launching attacks, trying to find some way to disrupt our clients. And so that's what we thought our business was. And starting about 2 years ago, because we had so many original content creators that were behind us, because we had so many publishers that were using us, they said, you think of the villain as China, but we increasingly see another villain which is out there, which are people who are taking our content and then repurposing it in some way. And AI companies, we're starting to sort of be on the scene that was there. And so we started to dig in.
So let me just interrupt there. So 2 years ago, which is post ChatGPT and a couple months after that, are you saying that you started to see this happening and your customers talking about it before that happened or after that happened?
No, I think the ChatGPT moment was the moment which publishers sort of started to talk to us. They may have seen it before. To be honest, we were clueless. Like we're a bunch of cybersecurity folks. but our customers said, hey, this is a problem, can you help? And on the flip side, almost all the AI companies use us for security and other reasons. So we're the most popular cloud across all of the AI companies by far. So we had sort of a relationship between them, and we started talking to both sides of them. And importantly, we started actually looking at the data that was out there. And we have data going back reliably 10 years. The company's been around 15 years. The first 5 were a little bit crazy, but 10 years we can sort of say, okay, what is it? And so we looked 10 years ago and we said, okay, every time that Google sends you a visitor, how many pages do they have to crawl? And the answer 10 years ago was for every visitor you got, Google crawled 2 pages, was out there. And again, so that was what it was 10 years ago. What is it today? Turns out it's 6 crawls gets you 1 visitor, right? And the amount of crawling hasn't changed. Google has stayed actually incredibly consistent at their crawl rate over that same period of time. What's changed is the response that Google gives you back. So let's imagine you're like, I'm looking up, I don't know, something random. How old was John Candy when he died? In the past, it would present you 10 blue links, and you'd click on it and you'd go to a story about John Candy, passing away, and you'd read it and you get the answer. Now Google answers that question right on the page, and so you're less likely to go forward on that. And so as I spend time speaking with folks in the media and I say, how much harder has your business gotten over the last 3 years or 10 years? Almost universally they say it's about 3 times harder. And I think that's, again, a really good metric to see why. That's the good news. The problem is, as we start to look at these AI companies, what is it for OpenAI? It turns out it's 250 crawls for every visitor you send. That's still the good news. What is it for Anthropic? 6,000 crawls for every visitor you send.
Why is that? Why are those 2 numbers so different? I've seen those numbers.
I think that OpenAI just does a better job of actually crediting the sources. Anthropic just doesn't do it. And there are some. That's not because they're evil. That's not because they're trying to hurt publishers. It's often because it's really difficult with these systems to credit back where the information got it from. If you think right now, what food are you craving? Everyone might come up with a different answer. Now try to track why that's the food that you're craving. In some cases, you might be able to figure it out. But in other cases, it might be because you randomly saw an advertisement or you smelled something as you're walking by. What's interesting about these AI systems is they take all this data, it goes into this black box, but it's really hard to say, okay, here's where that particular answer came from. So it's hard to give that sort of credit. It's hard to footnote that correctly back to where the answer was. The challenge, though, is if publishing is struggling at a 6-to-1 ratio, I think it's dead at 250 to 1, and I think it's buried and forgotten about at 6,000 to 1. And if that's the case, that's a huge threat. From like publishing's perspective, it's obvious why it's a threat. From Cloudflare's perspective, it's a problem too, because if we don't have original content creators, then we don't have customers. And so we're like, whoa, that's a problem. But what's interesting is if you talk to the AI companies, you talk to Sam at OpenAI, he'll say, actually, it's a threat to us too, because if people aren't creating original content, that's the gasoline that fuels these engines. So you need to have that original content. And to some extent, he's like, listen, I'm happy to pay for content. And OpenAI has done a really good job actually going out and paying for content. But what's hard is, he's like, but the OpenAI folks will say, we can't be the suckers. It can't be that we pay for it and everybody else gets it for free. So you've got to create scarcity. And so at that point, we're like, aha, there's something that we can do. It's not like the evil hacker that we're blocking, but we can say we know very reliably that if a visitor is coming to a page, that this belongs to some sort of an AI crawler, and we can then give the content creators back the tools to be able to, first of all, understand what's going on. Secondly, be able to control that. So say, listen, I've done a deal with OpenAI so that they should get access, but I haven't done it with Anthropic, so they shouldn't. Or whatever the next startup is, or anything down the line. And then third, eventually, we should figure out how can we build a rate card where you as a content creator can say, by default, here's how much it costs to crawl a page if you're an AI company. Here's how much it costs if you use my information in order to do that. And if we can do that, I think that's what the internet's going to change, right? The search-driven business model of the internet isn't going to be the business model of the internet going forward. And to the extent that we can help figure that business model out, I think it is existential for us as a business, but it's actually existential for the internet itself to figure out a new business model. Otherwise, content creators won't create content. There are lots of different reasons why people create content, but there's always some value behind it. It might be you sell ads, it might be you sell subscriptions. Value doesn't have to be monetary, though. It might be that you just do it because you are obsessed with some particular thing. You might be a huge John Candy fan, and so you write a bunch of content about John Candy. But if all of a sudden, like, your traffic visitors go to zero and it feels like nobody is actually reading your content, like, even if the only reason you create it is sort of the ego and joy of knowing that you're sharing something with the world, the problem with the AI model today is you don't know that anymore. You don't even get that ego hit anymore. And I think that if that goes away, then content creators aren't going to create content, and that's going to be bad for the internet.
So a lot to unpack there. Let me start with the question that I want to make sure I understand correctly. In your vision here, every content creator does need to have a deal with the AI companies for this to work, or it more passively happens because the infrastructure is set up to, like in the traditional sense, you didn't need to have a deal with Google to benefit from Google. So how does that work now?
Yeah, I think so. So first of all, my utopian vision of the future is that we get to a place where humans get content for free and bots have to pay a lot for it. Like, that would be amazing, because again, I think all the paywalls that have gone up, like, again,
I like that idea very much.
I can afford to sign up for a bunch of paywalls, but I really do worry about the kid in Rwanda who's brilliant, but today has much less access. Even though there's just as much information out there, if we're monetizing it through subscriptions, I worry that kid doesn't have access to that, and that was going to disadvantage them going forward. So I think that's really important for us to figure out. The part about then the bots pay for it, if you're a big company, then absolutely you should go out and strike whatever the best deal is with OpenAI. But let's imagine you're a content creator who's, I don't know, covering the traffic on I-70 in Indianapolis. That's actually really valuable data for AI companies to have, but you may not want to go negotiate with all of them. But if you had you could set a basic rate card that said, if you want to be able to use my traffic data to predict, should I leave the house now or should I leave the house in an hour? You need to pay me something for that. Again, the first step is you have to create scarcity. You can't just give the content away for free to bots. And then we can figure out how to actually monetize that going forward. So in the next little bit, we think at Cloudflare we've figured out how from across our customers we can distinguish what pages should be blocked versus what should be allowed through. And then we're going to restrict access to all of the AI companies that are out there and put together a basic rate card of, if you want access to our customers' data, here's what you need to pay them in order to get that access.
And again, just so I understand, the content provider that has said, I don't have a deal with that AI company yet, at least, they will potentially need to endure a period of losing whatever small amount of referral traffic might come from those links while this kind of process of developing a healthier economic system going forward takes place.
Yeah, or again, it's up to the content. If you want to continue to if you're just like, I'm happy to power the robots of the future, like, great. That is your choice as a content creator. But if you're frustrated today and you're saying, listen, I'm suffering, I'm dying, I'm seeing my traffic growth fall off a cliff, I'm seeing any advertising revenue that I had fall off a cliff, I'm seeing subscription revenue I had fall off a cliff, and I'm worried about this, like, we want to give you the control to be able to do that and let you set what your rates are in order to be able to be compensated for the content you're creating.
All right, thank you. That is a huge conversation. I would love to talk more with you about that at some point. But let's move on for now. We've just got a few minutes left. The 20% figure, 25% of the internet kind of lives behind Cloudflare's protection. Why not more? What are the factors that limit the other parts of the internet from being in your customer base? Is it a function of only so many hours in the day, only so many salespeople, whatever? Or is it more, our services apply to some but not all of the market that's out there?
I think first of all, it is a pretty awesome responsibility that, when I remember several years ago we had an outage, went offline, and I got a call from a customer. He said, "Okay, are you coming back?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we're getting back. So sorry." He's like, "Great, because there are certain planes that can't land if Cloudflare is offline." My wife actually at that same time had gone to the grocery store, and she's like, "So strange, all the cash registers went offline." And I was like, "Yeah, that was my fault." And she was like, "No, there are a lot of things in the world that are your fault, but this one probably wasn't." And I was like, "NCR customer, we had a problem and they went offline." So again, I think it's a pretty awesome responsibility, and I feel so honored that so many of our customers have chosen to do this. I think that there are parts of the internet, both Google and Facebook are customers, but if you go to Facebook.com, like it's not sitting behind Cloudflare. They run their own infrastructure. If you go to Google.com, it's not sitting behind Cloudflare. They run their own infrastructure. They use us for other things, but in those cases, some portions of the internet that are run by the huge giants, they wouldn't sign up for us. So that's fine. That'll be all what they do. But we think that we can take everybody else who's not Google and Facebook, and we can give them the resources as if they were Google and Facebook, and help in a number of different ways. And whether that's protecting against Chinese hackers, or whether that's helping make sure that you're getting fairly compensated for the content you create. Our mission is to help build a better internet, and that's what we think about every single day.
Back to security for a second, because I'm intrigued by something I've heard you say once or twice, where you advance the idea that it is better that many companies want one security solution as opposed to cobbling together lots of different vendors to create a sort of a chain of security and redundancies. You have mentioned that the thing that I've heard you say is that those seams between those vendors can be where the vulnerabilities can exist for attackers to exploit. So can you just talk a little bit about how that works and why it is that like one company instead of many is beneficial?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, the good news is if you do security right, you can be very secure. A lot of, if you look at a lot of the big, providers that are out there, the Googles of the world, they have just built a really good model on how to do security, and their employees get phished and all kinds of things, but they contain those threats, and they've done a good job at actually kind of closing that in. A lot of the companies that have problems are actually in the legacy space. It's the insurance company that's a conglomeration of a whole bunch of different acquisitions over time. The airline that is still running. Like if you want to just be depressed, like look over like the ticket counter window at the screen that someone who's booking a ticket for you is doing at the airport. There's a lot of old tech which is there, and I think that's what hackers are able to exploit. And so I think the good news is that if you do have a good, thorough, modern, comprehensive solution, you can stay ahead of this. And I think what we're proud of is that for at least the network security bit, we have a very end-to-end solution that we'll stop DDoS attacks from you, but we'll also replace your firewall. We'll have a VPN that's actually faster, using it around the world, and that becomes a really unified solution. I don't know that the answer is it's just one company does it all for you. I think we think of network security as the space that we're in. We partner with folks who do endpoint security. We're not an antivirus company. CrowdStrike does a great job of that. SentinelOne does a great job of that. We're not an identity company either. Okta or Ping Identity. Others that Microsoft do great jobs at that. And so I don't think the answer is just use one, but I do think that if you can have a comprehensive solution, and again, we think that should be available to anyone regardless of what their budget is. So we provide all these services a free version. That is something which, again, done correctly, you can be very secure online today.
So last question, what is a thing that you worry about in terms of security? What is a vulnerability that is sort of underappreciated by the general public, maybe even underappreciated by other people in the security space that you kind of see bubbling up that concerns you?
The first thing that sprung into mind was I worry about my aging parents. My 83-year-old dad called me the other day, and he's like, "Hey, someone just called me and said that that they were from the bank, and someone had wired quite a bit of money out of my dad's account. And I said, that's pretty embarrassing given who your son is. Thankfully, I was friends with the CTO at JP Morgan Chase, and we could recover it pretty quickly. But I do think that individuals still there's a real challenge if you're a legacy enterprise, if you're an 83-year-old parent. There's a lot of ways that you can get taken advantage of, and it I think that the good news is that when we get to the other side of this, we can actually make things more secure. But in the meantime, any system that in the past relied on, what did your voice sound like? What did your face look like? These things that are actually not secure, those are going to be places where there are going to be some pretty bad stories in the short term. And AI is going to hurt that. Again, I think over time, AI actually makes us more secure. But in the short term, again, I worry about my dad and my mom and what and how they might be tricked by again bad guys that are out there.
Yeah, it really does feel like we're in this kind of transitional period that reminds me a lot of the sort of late 90s kind of phase where the vision was there, but it wasn't fully built yet, and there are bad actors that tend to slip into those opportunities and exploit them. But anyway, thank you, Matthew. Great conversation. Really appreciate it. Everyone else, please do. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brendan.
Stick around. We've got a happy hour coming up. We've got some music, and then we're back tomorrow for our third and final day of the grill, and hope to see you all then too. Thank you.